Alright, I got the Camaro pushed back away from the fence there. I got everything I need to do some measurements on the drive shaft for this thing. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to measure the drive shaft and get the torque converter bolts in and probably go ahead and put some transmission fluid in it. So, but the first thing we have to do is change out. I had a 1310 flange yoke in the rear end, and I guess that ain't going to cut it. So I'm going to put a 1350 yoke, actual yoke in the rear end. After I get that in, we'll get some measurements, but we got to get it up in the air first. Alright, I got it up in the air. I got these two small jack stands in the front. I probably should have put the bigger ones up front, but oh well, I got the jack up here holding it too. And then the back, and I got those on wood because it's on gravel. I got these big jack stands in the back. Now, this rear end, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not, but when you set your pinion preload, a lot of the rear ends, they use a crush sleeve that you have to crush to get the preload right, and them things, they suck. When I do rear ends, I use a solid spacer. So if you had a crush sleeve, you'd have to do that all over again. But I have a solid spacer, so I should be able to just take that flange out and put the yoke in and torque it down, and it should be good. But I'm going to spin the wheel just to, as a before and after, how good it spins. If you get that pinion yoke too tight, but with a solid spacer, it shouldn't let me get it too tight, no matter how tight I get the bolt, because it spaces it out. But let me run some extension cords and get the impact under there and get that nut off. Alright, under the car, I'm about to zap that nut off. And there's the flange I was talking about. The socket I'm using is a 1/16 for this 8.8 rear end. I don't know if they're all the same, but that's the size this one is. Alright, it took that nut right off. So what I'm going to do now is just tap it right here lightly. Turn it, tap, turn, tap right in this hole until it comes off. If it don't come off, you gotta go get the tool, the little pulley to get it off. But I've already tapped on it some, it's moving already. But I'm gonna go ahead and get the other yoke and get it ready, just because it's starting to leak fluid. When I pull that one out, I want to go ahead and be able to stab the other one back in. Alright, there's the new chromoly rear end yoke. It came with a new bolt, and it came with the heavy duty U bolts, U clamps, C clamps, whatever. That's why I went with the Denny's Driveshaft one. I'm gonna get the strange 3-inch chromoly Driveshaft with the upgraded weld-on ends. But I got this from Denny's Driveshaft because it was the same price as the strange one, and this one came with the nut and the heavy-duty U bolts and the nuts and everything. So let's go ahead and finish knocking that one out. See what we got. Oh, also that one came with a bunch of that sticky packaging material, so I cleaned all that off, and as you can see, I lubed the end of it with Vaseline. But let's knock this one out and see what we got. There we go. I knocked all that out of there, and I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a solid spacer down in there with some shims, and all that's not even a year old, so I'm not going to replace any of that. Just make sure none of the shims come off with it. It doesn't look like they did, so I can go ahead and stab this one in there before I lose all my fluid. Man, that gear oil stinks. So yeah, there's the difference of those. You can't really tell the height because that one's got a little lip on it. Alright, it's up in there and I got the nut started. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the impact. I don't know what the torque is on these. But last time I just impacted it down and went with it. That solid spacer in there, it only lets it get so tight. Alright, there it is. It's on there and tightened up. Everything seems to look good. Wheels still turn good, and I just torqued it with that torque wrench the best I could. I mean, I didn't lay it on there for, you know, a long time, but I hit it for a good 10 seconds, 5-10 seconds. Look at there, the rear end's hitting a little right there, the torque arm mount. But yeah, that nut already had Loctite on it, so that should be good. So now, when you take these measurements, you got to take them with the rear end loaded. So that's why I put the jack stands on the rear end rather than on the body. And we're going to take a measurement from the top of that yoke where the center of the U-joint would be, which would be right on that ledge. So right at the edge of the top of that ledge, and then we're going to go to the top of the transmission. Right at the very top of where the transmission begins, not the shaft, but the top of the transmission. So I'm gonna go ahead and, I don't have but one hand, so what I'm gonna do is vice grip the tape measure on there right at the 1 inch mark, and then yeah. All right, right there, I got it right at the 1 inch mark with some vice grips. Then we'll just take the other end up and see what we got, and minus an inch. Alright, so honestly, I thought I was only going to be at about 45 inches, 43 maybe. Oh, I can't see, can you? We're right at 46 6/8. Remember, we had to minus an inch. Yeah, 46 6/8. $46 6/8. All right. So we need to know that number too, because this car is going to go to about 7,000 RPM. They got a little chart on the Strange Engineering site that you don't want to go over 80% critical speed for, so. Alright, so here's the critical speed chart for the 3-inch and 3.5-inch outside diameter drive shafts. You got the length of the drive shaft in the far left. The first column is the half critical speed for the 3-inch, and then the 80% critical speed for the 3-inch, and then half critical speed for 3.5-inch, and then 80% critical speed for the 3.5-inch. And what we're looking at, I'm going to get the 3-inch drive shaft, so we're looking at the 80% critical speeds for now. Now for 47 inches, that would be 7,040 RPM. But now this isn't measured the same. This is measured from the drive shaft itself, just the drive shaft. It's from center of U-joint to center of U-joint of the drive shaft itself. There's still a yoke that has to go in the back of the transmission, and that's going to take about, so the drive shaft itself is only going to probably be around 43, 44 inches. So, you know, max of 45 inches. So that has us at 7,680, 80% critical speed. The max the drive shaft is going to be is 45 inches. So with the transmission yoke and everything in there from center of U-joint to center of U-joint, that's probably about where it's going to be. So yeah, the 3-inch outside diameter drive shaft is going to work just fine. 46 and 6/8. I keep saying that because I don't want to forget it. And then we're minus an inch here because we got it set right on an inch. All right, 46 and 6/8. And then another measurement we have to take. Oh, hope I'm not making it out dizzy. All right. I got it zoomed in. Another measurement we got to take, and I'm going to do that with the ruler, is from there, the back of the transmission, to the end. Ow! I just hit my face with the roller. Let me get a better angle at this. That looks like 5/8. Yeah, 5/8. Right at 5/8. Yep, 5/8. Alright, so now we're going to do some torque converter bolts. Here's the torque converter bolts I got. 230-7303, ARP. Now, on these ARP bolts, I've got the head bolts too, so some of these washers have a beveled side on one side, they're flat on the other. That beveled side has to go down on the nut, so there's the beveled side, and put that down on the nut, on the bolt head. And then there's some measurements we got to take of this too. You only want to pull the transmission out, or the torque converter out of the transmission, an 1/8 inch to 3/16 of an inch to engage the flywheel. Now, I've done cars in the past that almost had over 1/4 of an inch, and I ran with it and it was fine, but we're going to make sure that that we're on this one, we're an 1/8 inch of to 3/16, because when it blows that fluid through there, it pushes the torque converter back and forth, and you can damage your thrust bearing in your motor and something in the pump, if, from what I understand correctly, if that's too loose or too tight. So let's get down here and make some measurements for that. Alright, not sure how good y'all can see that there, but we're about 1/4 inch out, about like I figured. So we need a washer about an 1/8 inch or 1/16 of an inch thick in between there. So I'll have to go to the parts store and get that. Unfortunately, and you got to make sure your torque converter is all the way back, which this one is. And unfortunately, I bought 7/16 bolts. They're not going to work. I'm going to have to reorder 3/8 inch bolts. But yeah, before I can put that back on. Alright, I went to the parts store and I got these nut and bolts. These are grade 8 bolts. Grade 8 nuts. They're 3/8. Those will fit in the hole. My flex plate, I always call it a flywheel. But the flex plate is only 3/8 inch hole, so those 7/16 won't fit through there. The only bad thing about it is these are 16 pitch. And most 3/8 I saw online for torque converter bolts were 20 pitch, and the 7/16 were 24 pitch. Which just means there's more threads per inch or whatever. But the more threads, the better. It seems they tighten down better and less likely to come loose. But I also got some lock washers. So I'm going to put a lock washer on both sides. And two of these is right at a 16th, or an 1/8, my bad. Two of these are right at an 1/8 of an inch. So we was a little over 1/4 of an inch. So we needed a 16th. We needed an 1/8 to 3/16. I might have said that wrong last time, but it's an 1/8 to 3/16. So we need to take a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch out of it. So I'm just going to put both of these on there, on each one of them, and put these in and see what happens. Alright, I had to screw this in a little, and then I'll have to take it back off to get the lock washer on. But yeah, I measured it, and it was right at a 1/8 to 3/16. So almost take that back off and put the lock washer back on. I had to tighten it, bring the torque converter in a little bit, and then I'll put the lock washer on. Then I'll have to spin them all around and get them on, then start tightening them. All right, I got it all in. Lock washer on this side, lock washer on this side. Just 2 washers to space it out. This torque converter had convenient little slots in it. You can stick a screwdriver or a tire iron pry bar in there. That's what I was using, tire iron pry bar. I just stuck it in that hole and turned it around, and I put all the nuts and bolts on, and the washers, I had to use a magnet to get those washers up in there. A magnet and a screwdriver. Once I got them all in, then I went back around again and tightened them all up. That's it. Now it just needs a drive shaft and some fluid. Boop, boop.